Welcome to the Squid Game, the Broken Game. Welcome back, everyone, to my podcast. I'm so honored and thrilled to see all of you again and discuss about the philosophy of game, philosophy of life, hidden behind the amazing TV show, The Squid Game. In the last episode, we discussed about the importance of fairness in all kinds of games, all kinds of philosophy related to it, how actual philosophers and game experts think about fairness. And finally, we discussed about the frontman from the Squid Game, about why he must be so obsessed with the concept of fairness. As I told you guys last time, now is the moment to think about the question: is Squid Game a game that is truly fair? Is it really like the ideal type of society that the frontman believed in? Now, I would personally prefer to approach this matter from two perspectives. Firstly, I would like to think about the rules and the systems of the Squid Game. And secondly, I would like to take a look at the specific games that appear in the entire Squid Game. Then, let's first talk about the systemic aspects of the Squid Game. To be honest, if you look at how the game is being operated, I wouldn't say that the Squid Game is a fair game. The biggest reason to this claim is because everything that is done within the game is geared toward the entertainment of the so-called MVPs. For your information, the MVPs are super rich people who pays a tremendous amount of money to keep the Squid Game up and running so that they can watch it for their pure joy and entertainment. Now, while the frontman seems to believe in the value of fairness, he is willing to go against the concept of fairness if it goes against to the entertainment of the MVPs. So this is quite contradictory. And this also shows that the Squid Game is not an inherently fair game in the first place. Recall the glass bridge game, where participants were supposed to jump on to glass bridges, and it was dependent on their pure luck if they survive or not. When one of the participants turned out to be a glass expert and used his knowledge to determine whether the glass he is going to step on is a strong glass or weak glass, the MVPs got bored. That is when frontmen just simply decided to turn off the lights in the stadium so that the glass expert can no longer utilize his knowledge. To such action of a frontman, some people might say that he was actually trying to preserve fairness. They might say that the frontman did not wanted participants to use skills or knowledge acquired from the outside world to win the game, because that might seem like a privilege to the frontman's eyes. However, I disagree with this statement. I think that the frontman is actually being contradictory in this case. This is because, leaving aside the glass bridge game instance, there were still many other instances where players utilized their own strength and their own knowledge and their own intelligence to overcome obstacles within the game. This might be also considered as a privilege, but the frontman did not stop anyone from doing such things. He only stopped the glass experts when he believed that the MVPs were not enjoying the game enough. Even if we accept the idea that frontman was still trying to preserve fairness, not just do something good for the MVP, there are many questions that are left unsolved. For example, what is privilege? Is being born with a very smart brain or being born with a really strong body not a privilege? Are knowing game information beforehand or being a glass expert only privilege? As many of you would have noticed here, the distinction between the things I mentioned first and the things I mentioned second is very thin. It's very subtle. No one can tell me the exact logical reason why some things are considered as privilege that destroys fairness, while some things are not privilege. Therefore, That is the reason why I believe that the Squid Game systemically cannot be fair in the first place, and why I think that the system itself is full of contradictions and inconsistencies. One thing to note here, however, is that these inconsistencies pose a whole new question, a whole new opportunity to think about our lives and games. I think the inconsistencies we see in the Squid Game are trying to tell us that no game, literally, on this planet can be fair 100%. As long as human differences exist, as long as we were born with different genetical informations rooted inside our bodies, there are bound to be privileges, there are bound to be advantages and disadvantages among people, among participants. Isn't this a pretty stunning and intriguing idea to consider about? Well, as for now, we'll leave this idea aside and now move on to examining the Squid Game with the second perspective. We're going to look at specific games and see if they're designed to be fair in the first place. The game that caught most of my attention was obviously the marble game, where participants would split into teams of two and they had to set their own rules to decide who is going to be the winner and take all the marble. While there are so many reasons why the marble game is quite problematic if you're going to judge whether it's a fair game or not, the biggest reason I think it's unfair is because of the information asymmetry between the two participants. The information asymmetry is bound to happen in this game because either one of the two participants have to set the rules. When he or she decides what kind of game to play, it is obvious that they have decided a game that they at least know something about, which means that they have previous experiences of playing the game or they know how to win the game easily. At that very moment, the player who set the game rules have more information of the game than the other player. This is why the information asymmetry happens, and this is why the marble game is bound to be unfair systematically. This is well shown from the battle between Ali and Sangwoo, when Sangwoo tricks Ali so that he can take all the marbles and win the game. Although the aspect of asymmetry is quite differently nuanced, the asymmetry also occurs between Ilnam, the grandfather, the old guy, and Ki-hoon, who is the main character. Ki-hoon actually utilizes the advantage he has, which is that the grandfather loses his memory easily. So, in conclusion, the marble game itself is designed to be unfair. Therefore, if we combine the first analysis, the first perspective, and the second perspective, it is evident that the Squid Game is not such a fair game in the first place. Yay. So we got a conclusion. We got our answer for the question that we've been asking ourselves for the past two episodes. We finally concluded that the Squid Game is not a fair game. Then now what? Now what are we going to talk about? Personally, I would love to go deeper into the message that this contradiction is throwing at us. What contradiction? The contradiction that the Squid Game, a game that the frontman tried to keep fair at all costs, was in fact not fair to begin with. This can mean a lot of things. Like I mentioned previously, this can mean that in any kind of society, including the small society of a Squid Game or the actual world we're living in, it's actually impossible to achieve 100% fairness. And like nothing can be actually and virtually equal. At the same time, this can also mean that the faith of the frontman was wrong. Although he would have thought that he is working for the benefits of the victims of the cruel world, all the means that he were using to achieve such an end was such inhumane and injustice means. He killed people. He killed people's lives like it was nothing. He sacrificed so many innocent people for the fun of the selected few people. This was clearly wrong, and that is maybe why the directors wanted Squid Game to be never fair, so that it can never reach the ideal that the frontman so firmly believed in. These are merely just few answers that I could think of for the meaning of the contradiction. What are your opinions? What other creative interpretation of the contradiction can be done? As we finish today's podcast, I beg you to think of the meaning of the contradiction that shows up in the Squid Game, which will be a very fun intellectual adventure. Next time, which will be presumably our last series of the podcast, we'll be looking into the voluntariness of the Squid Game and how it's related to the definition of game and the philosophy of game, which will be also very exciting. So, everyone, thank you for staying with me tonight. It was a wonderful time. I wish all of you had a very pleasant experience, and I'll be expecting to see you guys on the next episode. See you all. Bye bye.